Hello everyone, welcome back to Maelstrom Gaming. My name is Malachi Gardner, and today I'm going to be unboxing the Sinister Motives expansion for Marvel Champions. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Alright, so this is the Sinister Motives expansion for Marvel Champions. This is a campaign expansion, as you can see from the size, and I believe this is the 4th campaign expansion, so that's pretty cool. Marvel Champions is still relatively young for an LCG, but it's really starting to get a decent amount of expansions out, which is quite cool to see. And I'm really excited to look inside this one and then to see the expansions come out for this next cycle, because I really enjoy Spider-Man and the whole Into the Spider-Verse comic storyline. It's very cool, so having lots of characters from that storyline is quite neat. And even if that does mean we get Spider-Ham as a playable character, it still will be pretty cool. So this expansion, Ghost Spider and then Miles Morales Spider-Man, and then looks like we have 5 scenarios with Sandman, Dr. Octopus, Venom, and Mysterio. And I'm sure that the other members of the Sinister Six are also in this expansion somewhere. Alright, so let's go ahead and read this. Flavor text here is Sinister Motives. This is our day, gentlemen, the day the Sinister Six reign supreme. Dr. Octopus. This giant-sized 265 card expansion sends you and your friends through a grueling gauntlet, battling a host of 10 iconic villains as you attempt to save the citizens of New York City. Sinister Motives features 5 all-new and interconnected scenarios, forging a legacy of fame and infamy that will challenge even the most skilled heroes. With so many evildoers rallied against you, can you survive their sinister motives? Alright, so I'm going to open this up, take everything out, and I'll be right back. Alright, so we have a rulebook, piece of cardboard, a informational poster here, some novels, and then of course the X-Men Mutant Insurrection board game there. Alright, so the rulebook here, looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4 pages of rules, and then looks like we start in the 5 scenario campaign. So it looks like we have Sandman, and then Venom. And if you want to read this, you can go ahead and pause your screen to read these pages, but I'm not going to read it here. Then we have Mysterio. Scenario 4 is the Sinister Six, so that'll be pretty neat, having a whole scenario where you're fighting multiple enemies. And then Venom Goblin. And then starter decks, rules clarification, and then some FAQ. And then the campaign sheets. A reputation track here, different rewards or punishments based off of the reputation there. Looks like it actually only goes up, so you can only have a positive reputation. There's nothing below 0. Which makes sense for Spider-Man and a superhero. Okay. So that is that. Pretty cool. Then we have the usual 5 decks of cards and our trench. And everything's like pink and purple, which is kind of interesting. Alright, so looks like we have our starter decks here and some villain cards. I'm not going to take too much a look at the villain cards. I'm going to focus mostly on the player cards. But we'll take a look at a couple of these. Alright, so I just took off all the packaging off of these decks here. And so let's see, this looks like it's the first one for the villains. And so we have Sandman. So, stage 1, we have 1 scheme, 2 attack, 16 hit points, and then a Sandblast special ability attached to his attack. Forced to interrupt when Sandman attacks you, that attack deals indirect damage. If your identity takes any amount of damage from this attack, resolve Surging Sand's ability on city streets. Okay, so having it, Sandman deal indirect damage instead of just regular damage is kind of interesting. So it's almost like an AoE attack. When you are dealt indirect damage, you actually can divide the damage, spread around your allies and your hero, so you can have multiple targets be dealt damage. But one thing you can't do with indirect damage is have like a chump blocker, so you can't have an ally with 1 hit point left take 3 indirect damage. You can only take 1 damage because then he'd be knocked out, and the other 2 damage have to go somewhere else. So you don't have that workaround, but that's kind of interesting, having a villain only dealing indirect damage. And just real quick, in case you're wondering, I am getting over a cold here, so if I sound a little bit weird, that's why. I'm feeling much better. So his attack also references the City Streets environment here, so that's what this is. So Surging Sands says special, place 1 sand counter here, discard cards from the top of the encounter deck equal to the number of sand counters here, and then hero action, exhaust a character you control, remove sand counters from here equal to that character's attack, limit once per round per player, and so every time he attacks, you're going to have to resolve the Surging Sands ability, and so with that, you're really going to be milling through the encounter deck very quickly. Chances are you're going to get a decent amount of acceleration tokens that are going to make things very tricky for you. Alright, and we have quite a few of these Santa clones, so let's read this here. And so he has 1 scheme, X, attack, 3 life. X is equal to the number of sand counters on city streets. When defeated, resolve the Surging Sands ability on city streets. Alright, so that is kind of interesting. Having, I'm sure there's a lot of other things in this scenario that actually revolve around the city streets environment with the Surging Sands, which of course makes sense. Having a lot of sand effects in the Sandman expansion, or scenario rather. Alright, let's take a look at Venom. Again, I'm going to spend more time on the hero cards than the encounter cards. We have Venom here with 1 scheme, 2 attack. He starts with toughness, so get a tough status card, and then vengeance. Force response, after you attack and damage Venom, with a card you control, place 1 face down boost card on your identity. Alright, so bell tower environment. And this is double-sided, okay. So this is the quiet side here, so location quiet, and then the other side is location ringing. So if there are at least 3 per player, chime counters here, flip this card. Interrupt when any amount of damage would be dealt to Venom by an attack. You may place that many chime counters here instead. Increase all damage Venom takes by 1. If there are no chime counters here, flip this card. Forced interrupt when Venom attacks. When Venom's attack would deal any amount of damage, choose an identity, remove that many chime counters from here. For each chime counter removed this way, prevent 1 of that damage. Okay, so you can basically attack the bell towers instead of attacking Venom, and then you can flip it over, and Venom is very much weakened by this bell tower being ringing. So that's interesting. Looking forward to seeing how that plays out. Let's read Biting Retort. So the treachery, 1 revealed, Venom activates against you. Each boost card turned faced up during this activation gets +1 boost icon. And then boost, remove 1 chime counter from the bell tower. So this is actually, that could be pretty bad because of Venom's ability. Whenever he attacks you and you take damage, you place 1 face down boost card on your identity, and then this will give all face down boost cards a +1. Well, in addition to the one that is dealt to you face up from the attack. So that could do a lot of damage with Biting Retort. Or I guess it also could work as a scheme too. So that's interesting. So that's Venom, the second scenario. Then we have Mysterio. He has 2 scheme and 1 attack. And Seeds of Fear is his ability here. It says, Force response, after you resolve a boost card during Mysterio's activation, place that card in your discard pile if it has the illusion trait. Okay? So then, let's go ahead and find a card with illusion trait, because that's kind of interesting. Alright, so Humongous Hallucination here has a +3 attack, which is a lot. Attached to Mysterio, hero action, spend 1 resource of any type and shuffle the top 2 cards of the encounter deck into your deck and discard this card. So I am assuming let's see. Yeah, when you would draw or discard an encounter card from your deck, deal it to yourself as a face-down counter card. Draw one card. Alright, so that's what I figured. Basically, just whenever a counter card comes out of your deck, you just put it face down and we'll resolve it during the villain's turn. So you could get a lot of cards coming out all at once if you draw multiple encounter cards on the same turn. So that's not good. Alright, so that's Mysterio. Then we have the Sinister Six. So we have Dr. Octopus, Electro, Hobgoblin, Kraven the Hunter, Scorpion, and Vulture. And so, let's just look at the setup here. It says choose X villains at random, where X is one more than the number of players. Put those villains into play, then place the active counter on the villain with the lowest activation order value, and set the other villains aside. Put the light at the end, side scheme into play, trap side face up. Special choose a set aside villain at random, put that villain into play, and place the active counter on it. In expert mode, place 2 threat on light at the end. Forced interrupt. When a villain would activate if no villain is in play, resolve this card's ambush ability, continue that activation. Okay, so it's been a while since I've actually played the Wrecking Crew scenario, but that also had multiple villains in the play at the same time, and so this is using a similar activation, one person's only activated at a time type thing, because a lot of effects will target the villain. So, it's assuming that there's just one villain, and so having multiple villains makes that a little bit different. So you have all these villains out here, and they'll take turns activating. So let's go ahead and just read Electro here. So it's 2 scheme, 1 attack, force response. After Electro attacks and damages you, discard the top 7 cards of your deck. Move the active counter to the next villain in the activation order. When defeated, remove 4 threat from side scheme, 7 threat instead if no other villain is in play. Set this villain aside. And then let's go ahead and read this here. So light at the end, trap side up, this is the one that starts in play. Permanent hinder 10. The players cannot win unless they escape. Force interrupt. When the last threat is removed from the scheme, resolve the ambush ability on the main scheme and flip this card. Okay. Light at the end, chase. Permanent hinder 10. The players cannot win unless they escape. Force interrupt. When the last threat is removed from the scheme, the players escape and win the game. Okay, so this threat, or rather this scheme, is going to be all about removing threat then, since you're going to not necessarily win from defeating villains. So that'll be interesting, different change of pace. Normally, you're going to remove threat as a way of not dying, it's a preventative measure, and the way you win is by smacking the villains around. But in this scenario here, it's going to be all about removing threat, and I'm assuming damaging villains is more of a preventative measure instead of removing threat. So that'll be interesting, just kind of flipping things on its head. And of course, the last villain here is the Venom Goblin. And so we have 2 threat, 2 scheme, 2 scheme to attack, and has the steady keyword, and then infest the city. Force response after Venom Goblin attacks, activates against you, move the glider counter to the main scheme with the least threat. Choose to either place 2 threat on that scheme or resolve its special ability. Okay. And then we actually have 4 different main schemes. So, let's read the setup on this one here. Put the lower Manhattan, Midtown Manhattan, and upper Manhattan main schemes into play. Place the glider counter on Midtown Manhattan. Flip this card and set it aside. So, looks like we have 3 different main schemes here, and assuming this card will detail what happens, some special rules. So player cards that affect the main scheme can apply to any main scheme. Encounter cards that affect the main scheme only apply to the scheme with the glider counter, including the placing of acceleration tokens. Each main scheme accumulates threat each round according to its acceleration value and any acceleration tokens on that scheme. So this will be interesting, playing through with 3 different main schemes, and yeah, it'll be pretty neat. Alright, so looks like those are all the scenarios. Then we have the modular encounter sets. So we have City in Chaos, which has 5 cards. Ooh, it has Rhino. That's kind of neat. And then Down to Earth. So Common Criminal, Friends and Family, Volunteer Work, Threat or Menace, Loose Ends. So this is a very interesting one there. Makes a lot of sense for Spider-Man, actually. Yeah, just kind of everyday stuff. Any normal superhero would have to... More like street level stuff, really. So Goblin Gear, which I actually thought that was already a thing in the Green Goblin expansion. No, that was Goblin Gimmicks. That's what I'm thinking. Thinking of Goblin Gimmicks. So it's a little bit different. And we have Guerrilla Tactics, Life-Size Decoy, 0 Scheme, 0 Attack, 5 Health. In Expert Mode, Life-Size Decoy gains Toughness. The engaged player cannot thwart side schemes. Boost. Put this minion into play, engage with you. So that's kind of interesting. Then we have Osborne Tech. And Personal Nightmare. Evil Doppelganger. Sinister Assault. So, just the Sinister Six here. That's pretty neat. And Symbiotic Strength. So that's... I like the art on that one. That's pretty neat looking. And Whispers of Paranoia. Okay, so that is a lot of modular counter sets. So I'm going to go through and actually count them to see how many there are. Alright, so there are 9 different modular encounter sets. So that's quite a few. So that will be fun to play with. Lots more, modifications you can make, different scenarios and stuff. So that's neat. So then we have Public Outcry and Smear Campaign, which are bad publicity campaign cards. And then we have some Community Service campaign cards. Snitches Get Stitches. So another campaign card. So these are all the campaign cards. So Shield Tech. Venom, this is Eddie Brock. So we get Suit. Alright. Now, we can move on to the player cards. Okay, so we have Spider-Man. And so he has the standard 2 across the board, 9 health, hand size of 5, Venom Blast, special, deal 2 damage to an enemy, stun that enemy, and then Spider Camouflage, special, give Spider-Man a tough status card, confuse an enemy. Okay? So those are very powerful abilities. And then we have Recovery 4, and size of 6, and Response. After you change to this form, shuffle 1 Spider-Man card from your discard pile into your deck. I like that ability. Always nice to shuffle specific cards into your deck so that you can gain those cards a little bit faster. Arachnobatics. So it's event costing 1 and hero action. Attack, deal 2 damage to an enemy. If that enemy has a stun status card, deal 3 additional damage to that. If that enemy has a confused status card, deal 3 additional damage to it. So you could deal 8 damage with this card if you time everything correctly, and that would only cost you 1 resource to do that. So that's really cool. Double life, costs 1, max 1 per round. Action after you change your form. If you paid for this card using a fist resource, ready your identity. Get a couple of those. Swing in. Thwart costs 2. And Hero action. Thwart, remove 4 threat from a scheme. If you pay for this card using a mental resource, resolve Spider-Man's Spider Camouflage ability, which is the one that gives you tough and confuses an enemy. Web Shot, costs 2. Hero action attack, deal 4 damage to an enemy. If you pay for this card using a lightning resource, resolve Spider-Man's Venom Blast ability, which does 2 damage and stuns an enemy. So, lots of very specific resources you need to spend. So, that's can be tricky, but it's also kind of cool. Alright, John K. Lee. And it says, action, exhaust John K. Lee. Draw 1 card. If you're in hero form, choose and discard 1 card from your hand. Okay. So, some neat things here. We've got web shooters, which looks like it works just the same as it does for Peter Parker's. So, exhaust web shooter and remove 1 web counter from it to generate 1 resource. So, that's pretty cool. Alright, so those are some of his cards, and then some of his pre-con deck here. It's Justice, so it's Monica Chang, 1 thwart, so 1 thwart, 1 attack, 2 life, shield. After Monica Chang enters play, search your deck, hand, and discard pile for a copy of the Surveillance Team support, and put it into play. Put 1 snoop counter on each Surveillance Team you control. Spider-Woman, Jessica Drew, 1 thwart, 2 attack, 3 health. This is shield and web warrior. Reduce the cost to play Spider-Woman by 1 for each confused enemy in play. Homeland Intervention, costs 0, exhaust up to 3 shield cards you control, and choose a scheme. Remove 2 threat from that scheme for each card exhausted this way. Could be kind of interesting there. Global Logistics. Exhaust 1 shield card you control. Look at the top 4 cards of the player's deck or the encounter deck. Discard any number of those and put the others on top and or bottom of that deck in any order. That's pretty cool. That is actually really neat. Field Agent uses 3 backup counters. Hero Interrupt. When a shield ally would take any amount of consequential damage, exhaust Field Agent and remove 1 backup counter from it to prevent 1 of that damage. Nice to be able to prevent some of the consequential damage. Of course, we have Surveillance Team. And Agent 13. It's a neutral card, costs 4, 2 thwart, 1 attack, 4 life. Response after Agent 13 attacks or thwarts. Choose a shield support, ready that support. Dum Dum Gun. Alright. Very expensive with 5, but then he has 3 thwart and 3 attack. But then he takes 3 consequential damage for thwarting and 2 for attacking, so that's not great, but he has 5 health. And Interrupt. When you use one of Dum Dum's powers, basic powers, exhaust up to 3 shield cards you control. For each card exhausted this way, Dum Dum gets +1 to that power for this use. So that could be pretty neat. Yeah, that could be pretty cool because then you could exhaust them and they don't take any consequential damage. He does, but they still get to contribute something even though they don't actually... yeah, so that could be pretty cool if you have a bunch of like supports, like Surveillance Team, like the Helicarrier, exhaust those to give him some extra oomph. Could be neat. Go Spider. 1, so cost 3, 1 thwart, 2 attack, 3 health. Play only if you control a Web Warrior card. And when Ghost Spider leaves play, search your deck for an identity-specific event and shuffle it, and add it to your hand, and shuffle your deck. Spider-Man, nice and cheap here. Nice cheap 3-cost ally. He has 2 thwart, 2 attack, 3 health, and then requirement. Oh my goodness, when paying for this card, you spend the listed resources, so it's 1 of each type. So, yikes. you have to be very careful when you're playing this card. You need to have some very specific resources there, so that's kind of tricky. But after Spider-Man attacks or thwarts, choose another Web Warrior character, ready that character. So, very, very powerful, but that's extremely difficult to do. So, it'll be interesting to see how this works out. We have Young Love here. This is a team-up with Gwen Stacy and Miles Morales. Max 1 per deck. Alter Ego action, heal 3 damage from each, 3 damage each from Gwen Stacy and Miles Morales. Pretty decent there. I do like the team-up cards. I think it's a really neat idea, so glad to always see more of those. Government Liaison, 2-cost support. Hero action, exhaust Government Liaison to play a shield card from your hand, reducing its resource cost by 1. That can be useful. And Sky Destroyer, this is pretty cool looking. And it costs 3, another support. Response, after you play a shield card, exhaust Sky Destroyer, deal 2 damage to an enemy. Okay, and then, so we have Keeping Secrets as the obligation. And then we have Prowler as the villain here. 1 scheme to attack, Stalwart, 5 health. He's 5 health and Stalwart. When revealed, if you are in Ultimate Ego form, give Prowler a tough status card. Alright, so that is Miles Morales. And then you have Ghost Spider. So she has Spider-Man stats, which is pretty interesting. So 1 thwart, 2 attack, 3 defense, 5 hand size, and 10 hit points. Dizzying reflexes response after you resolve an interrupt or responsibility on an event. Ready, Ghost Spider. Limit once per phase. So this is very, could be very powerful if you're playing like a protection deck, but anyone has responses and interrupts, but protection has a lot of them, so that can be very useful there. So yeah, defend for 3 and then ready her, and then she can attack later on, or you can block again if need be. Gwen Stacy, 3 recovery, 6 hand size, action, choose to either shuffle Ticket to the Multiverse from your discard pile into your deck, or ready George Stacy, limit once per round. Alright, Ghost Kick, cost 2. Alright, here response attack. After Ghost Spider uses a basic power, deal 6 damage to an enemy. Max 1 per basic power use. Okay, we have a couple of those. Now, this is pretty neat, because this is a response, and so you could actually, it chains very nicely into actually exhausting to defend, and then that is using a basic power. And then you can play Ghost Kick, deal 6 damage to an enemy, and then ready her because you just played a response. So that's pretty cool. Looking forward to trying that out. Parental Guidance. So it's an alter ego action. And if George Stacy is in play, attach 1 event from your hand or discard pile face down to George Stacy. If George Stacy is not in play, search your deck and discard pile for him and add him to your hand. Okay. Phantom Flip. After Ghost Spider uses a basic power, remove 5 threat from a scheme. So very similar to the Ghost Tick, but this is for thwarting instead. Period and Punch. It's a hero interrupt. When a card is revealed from the encounter deck, deal damage to the villain equal to 1 more than the number of boost icons on that card. Cancel that card's 1 revealed effects. Oh my goodness. Wow. That's very powerful. I mean, being able to cancel card effects is always great, but also dealing some damage to the villain, that's really neat. That is pretty cool. Alright, Web Binding. Requirement, mental, and then Hero Interrupt. When an enemy would activate, cancel that activation. If a minion's activation was canceled this way, deal 4 damage to that minion. Alright, that's pretty cool. So you can just choose to stun somebody, pretty much, as an interrupt. Now, I mean, you could, I guess, confuse them instead, essentially. If you had someone else in alter ego form and you wanted to cancel that activation against them. But yeah, pretty neat there. And You can also use it to remove some minions from the board. George Stacy. Events attached to George Stacy may be played as if they were in your hand. Action exhaust George Stacy. Attach one event from your hand face down here to a maximum of 3. Very powerful there. Yeah, pretty cool. Ticket to the Multiverse. Action remove ticket to the Multiverse from the game. Discard your hand. Shuffle your discard pile into your deck. Drop your hand size and ready each Ghost Spider card you control. Okay, that is very powerful. It does a whole lot of stuff. Yeah. Almost gives you like an entirely like new turn if you play it. Just, alright, give me another turn. Pretty cool. Alright, Web Bracelet. Hero response after you resolve an interrupt or response ability on an event. Exhaust Web Bracelet, draw a card, max 1 per event. Alright, pretty neat. And then she is paired up with Protection, which makes a lot of sense. Alright, so we have Silk here, and so you have 1 thwart, 1 attack, 2 health. Response after you play Silk from your hand. If you control another Web Warrior card, search the encounter deck for a treachery and discard it. Spider-Man Miles Morales. 1 thwart, 2 attack, 3 defense. Response after you play Spider-Man from your hand, stun and confuse an enemy if you control at least 3 Web Warrior cards. Alright. I mean, that could be slightly tricky to do, but yeah, so this actually won't be as tricky to pull off as it seems, because your character, if your identity is Web Warrior, then you have Spider-Man counting as it one as well, because he's also Web Warrior. So you really just need to have one other Web Warrior in play, in addition to Spider-Man and your identity. So it'll be tricky, but it won't be as tricky as it kind of appears at first glance to pull that off. Spider UK. 1 thwart, 2 attack, 5 health. Interrupt when Spider UK defends against an attack. Deal damage to the attacking enemy equal to the number of Web Warrior cards you control. That's pretty neat. Bait and switch. So the villain will attack you and you can remove threat. And this is from an earlier expansion, I don't remember which one. Jump flip. Cost 1. An event. Here interrupt defense when you would take any amount of damage. Prevent 2 of that damage. If you pay for this card using a lightning resource, remove 2 threat from the main scheme. I like that. It's pretty nice. Return the favor. Hero action, attack. Discard cards from the encounter deck until you discard a treachery. Reveal that treachery. Deal 5 damage to the villain. Alright. A little bit risky, but I kind of like things like that. It's kind of cool to see sometimes. But you just have to be careful not to play too many cards that allow the villain to do extra stuff, because you get into lots of trouble. What doesn't kill me? The requirement, physical, and hero action. Heal 2 damage from your hero. Ready your hero. That's pretty nice. Get a little bit of healing, but really readying your hero is great. Alright, so we have Spider-Man, Hobby Brown, and so we have 2 thwart, 1 attack, 3 health. Play only if you control a Web Warrior card. Interrupt when Spider-Man leaves play. Discard the top 3 cards of the encounter deck. Deal damage to the villain equal to the number of boost icons discarded this way. Across the Spider-Verse. Max 1 per deck. Exhaust a Web Warrior card you control. Search your discard pile for a Web Warrior ally and put it into play. Then choose a player. That player may spend 3 resources of any type to repeat this ability. Okay. That's kind of interesting. Yeah. Pretty cool. Be able to search your deck for a specific ally is neat. And chances are you'll be able to get it at a discount, although you do need to exhaust a character you control, or actually just a card you control. So if you have, I don't know if they're Web Warrior like supports, but you could exhaust one of those and then pull out an ally. And then if you have another player may spend 3 resources of any type to repeat this ability, so everyone can do it, which is pretty neat. Another copy of Young Love, of course. The basic cards here. Web of Life and Destiny. And it actually is a support with the Web Warrior trait, so you could exhaust this if you wanted to, in order to use the Across the Spider-Verse card we just looked at. Ignore this card's resource cost if your identity has the Web Warrior trait. Okay, so this is free if you have a Web Warrior character. And response: after a Web Warrior ally leaves play, choose a player. That player draws one card. Alright, it's pretty interesting. Plan B. Alright, so you Spider-Ham on the picture there, which is a foretaste of the shenanigans that will be coming on with his whole expansion. Play under any player's control, max 1 per player. Hero action: exhaust Plan B and discard 1 random card from your hand. Deal 2 damage to an enemy. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting upgrade. Yeah, I mean, you can do 2 extra damage each turn with it. So if you have like an extra leftover card that you don't need for anything else, you may as well use Plan B and just get rid of that card, so you can fill up to your maximum hand size. So we have Worried Father as our obligation, and then the Wizard, of course, as the Nemesis. Alright, so that is the Ghost Spider, and that wraps up the unboxing of the Sinister Motives expansion. Looking forward to playing with this, and I may end up playing this on the channel. Playing through the campaign would be pretty cool. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching it, and thank you for bearing with me as I recover from my cold here. If you did enjoy this video, please like it, and consider subscribing to Maelstrom Gaming to see more content just like this. And until next time, happy gaming.